Hi students, hope you had a good week. This week we'll be looking at the purpose and functions of art. We'll cover why artists are compelled to create art, as well as decipher what different functions art can serve in our society. We spoke last week in our discussion board about aesthetics and awareness of beauty. When we talk about beauty, we often are talking about the classical definition of beauty. The classical meaning the Greek, Roman, or Renaissance art version of beauty. When we look at an image like this, we say this is a beautiful image, a beautiful woman in a boat moving across the water, very beautifully executed. As far as technique, the painter was obviously very skilled. We look at one of Klimt's pieces like this, The Lovers, we get a sense of tenderness between the two of them, a sense of calmness and wonderment at the passion and love that they're both feeling. Here, Van Gogh's Sunflowers, also another very beautiful, very simple, very clear vision of beauty. Now please take out your scrap piece of paper for your turn-in at the end of the lecture. I want you to jot down a few different ways that you document your daily activities. Think about ways you interact with technology, with people in your lives, with possibly even creative outlets that you use. So please pause the video and answer this question. So for how you document your daily activities, you may have said things like Facebook or Instagram or text messaging. Some of you even maybe journaling. One of the things that art does is it documents events for us. And often those events are a social event. So art can be often a commentary or a social commentary. We're going to look at the next slide, which will be an image from one of Goya's prints, 82 prints he did on the disasters of war. So these are an observation, a visual account of an event. Here, Francisco Goya's I Saw This from the Disasters of War series. You see mother and child fleeing. Everyone's moving towards the left. A great sense of horizontal linear movement towards the left, away from something fearful. Even the men in the background there, they're turning around in part terror to run away, to flee. So here Goya is documenting and observing things and events he saw. Please next answer these questions. What happens when we die? Who created the universe? And how did life begin? Often artists are exploring these questions. We are going to look at several thousand years of religious and spiritual art. So these are some deeply personal questions. Share as little or as much as you'd like to. There's of course no right or wrong answer here. And the point of this is just to get you to think about what your answers to these questions are, and maybe as a way that you'll be able to relate to some of the art we'll look at this semester. So please pause this video and answer these 3 questions. This next slide, the Tree of Jesse from Chartres Cathedral in France, is a Gothic cathedral. This stained glass panel inside of it talks about the genealogy of Christ. This interior space is illuminated with these stunning pieces of stained glass artwork, drawing our eye upward, hoping to get us excited about what the heavens hold for us. Our next 2 slides, the first from a school of Buddhism in Japan, and the second a mask from the Eskimos of the South. Here, this open space begs contemplation, begs spiritual stillness. The monks go into this open courtyard. They call it a garden with just rocks to tend. And in the ground there, you can see a large area of gravel. And the monk's job is to keep this gravel in order, to walk with a rake and make sure that every pebble is in perfect alignment. These masks from the Eskimo people of Southwest Alaska, These are masks that are meant to help induce a trance, help to connect the wearer to the spirit world through the acts of shamanism. One thing about looking at objects like this, artifacts like this, is that we're seeing them out of context. So this mask was meant to be worn, meant to be used in a religious ceremony, and here we're simply seeing it as it would be displayed in a museum. Who tells our stories when we are gone? What is important to remember? And I want you to think about these two questions as you write in the grand scheme of time. So not just who tells your stories when you've passed away, but overall in history, who are the story keepers? And when we look at history, when we think about history and our knowledge of history, what are things that are important to remember? What information is important to pass down? So please pause and answer those questions now. One of the great purposes of art is commemoration, and we spoke very briefly in the first chapter about that, about the Egyptian pyramids, and we'll look again in a moment about the Taj Mahal. So for commemorating an event, sometimes that just means erecting a monument to aid in the memory of one event. So maybe a celebration of a battle that was won. Sometimes a public celebration of a person's birth, a death, a wedding. Sometimes honoring patriotic actions of an entire group, so maybe a large group of Roman soldiers that did something successful. It makes us feel deeply that human life is significant. And so here, the Taj Mahal, built by a Shah for his beloved wife when she passed. You don't enter it, you walk around the outside of it, just like the stupa at Ganji we looked at. Many of you may have seen the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. It's in Washington, D.C. And this is a very simple, very beautiful list of 6,000 American soldiers who died in the Vietnam War or were missing in the Vietnam War. And you start at one end or the other where there's very few names. So here, just at the beginning, or over here, just at the beginning, there's room for just a few names. And as you progress towards the middle, it becomes an overwhelming list with hundreds and hundreds right in front of your face, thousands right in front of your face at a time. And it's supposed to be a journey for you to understand the horrors of war, the losses and the sacrifices that have been made for our religious and political freedoms. Please answer these questions. Who rules? So who's in charge and how do they get there? Think about how wealth is distributed, both in our country and maybe in other countries. How do people show power? So how do the people in charge show power? Or maybe people in your life, you might know somebody that has a great sense of power that is constantly wielding control, maybe over you or over somebody in your community. Who rules and how is authority maintained? So please stop and answer those questions. This is the head of Emperor Constantine. This colossal head, over 8 feet tall, was left in Rome for his civilians to see his great power when he moved the capital of Rome from Rome to Istanbul. This figure would have been over 40 feet high, and that was certainly intentional. He wanted people to see his huge, massive power, political power, and energetic power. The ancient Greeks, a civilization that was just before the Romans, focused their art primarily on ideals. So the next slide we'll look at, it's an idealized vision of what a human should do, the right thing and the best thing a human can do. Here's a charioteer, somebody in the prime of their youth, prime of fitness, prime of all things, doing a civil service, riding this chariot. This is one of the biggest questions that we spend a lot of time trying to answer for ourselves. You might, as maybe a freshman at Centenary College, be really thinking deeply about this question. Who am I? Who do I want to be? What do I want to study? Will that define who I am? Will that limit who I am? So please take a few moments and answer this question. I'd like for you to first answer it in one sentence. Who am I? So maybe that will be more of a definition. I am a such and such year old, that such and such. And then I want you to think a little more deeply about that. Think about where you've come from, where you're going, your values, and take a few moments and answer that in a few sentences. As we've advanced in society, as societies become more organized, politically structured, we've had a little bit more leisure time. And with that leisure time has come an expanding use of art as self-expression. So really just making art because you have something to say, something about yourself. And often it has to do with personality, conveying personality, feelings, or your worldview. We'll look at two self-portraits here. The first about a man's Jewish identity, and the second about a woman's connection to her Korean family history. So here, Nussbaum, his self-portrait with his Jewish identity card. You can see the Jewish star pinned on his jacket, the Jewish identity card telling the world who he is. This was done in 1943, just towards the end of World War II. And here, Young Soon Min's Dwelling. I would like for you to please listen to the podcast, a few minutes long, where she talks about this piece of art. So click on the links in YouTube or in Moodle to follow to this podcast. Kandinsky, who we looked at briefly last week, we talked about him in the context of musical expression and non-objective art, so art that we really can't find any images within. Here, he's a great example of art as self-expression. He's not recording anything, he's not documenting anything, he's not showing political power, all those different needs that are being fulfilled that we looked at in this lecture already. He's just translating his inner feelings. This image is quite a bit different than the Kandinsky composition we looked at last week. The one last week, if you'll remember, was very geometric, rigid, very clear shaped circles and triangles and lines. And here it's a little more what we call painterly. So you can see a little looser expression. You can imagine he was dancing a little bit more when he created this piece. As this is non-objective or non-figurative art, meaning that he's not representing or showing us something specifically, we understand that this is just really expressing a mood or an emotion. So instead of showing us in a concrete way, the way that figurative art or even abstract art might, this non-objective art piece is just showing us a little bit about his interior emotions. I want to finish today. I like to share a lot of videos during the course. This is one of my favorites. It's a stop motion animation by a small animation group. It's called Lost Things. And as you watch it, your last jot down, I just want you to think about why this was made. What is the purpose and function of this video? Thinking about the categories, the different subjects that we talked about during this lecture. Maybe it doesn't fit into one of them for you, or maybe it does. So I want you to just think about, what's the purpose of this? Why did the artists create this video? And again, the link to this is in Moodle and also at in the comment section of the YouTube page. Enjoy your week.